Alrighty. Let's see. There we go.
We are here.
We're here. Welcome to Easier Habits Live, your favorite 8 a.m. Central business strategy live stream. So I'm Alec from Easier Habits, business growth consultant.
And I am Meg. I am a global English communication coach and consultant. I don't know why I can't say that with a straight face. I always feel like
It's
I
a
have to be
mouthful.
like, I'm so la la la, but I'm not a teacher. So I guess, yeah.
I'm an English teacher.
I'm not an English teacher.
You're an English language business coach.
Yes. That's a good, English language business coach. I like that.
Right?
That's,
Because you're not English. You
Yeah.
don't have the accent.
no, I don't. I wish I did. That would be lovely.
English language business coach.
English language. Well, and
I don't know.
honestly, English.
Right.
I like the idea of communication,
Mhm.
right? English communication business coach. I think, maybe I don't know.
English communication. Yeah. Experiment. All right. So the saga of ads continues. I mean, honestly, we expect it will continue, so that'll be a big part of what we do going forward. That may be interrupted by other stuff, but is the biggest priority in our business. So we'll be giving updates on that after the communication tip.
Yes, our communication tip for the day. Sorry, my brain is like still in my thing. I guess. Okay, so kind of dovetailing off of what I was just saying, that idea of the way in which you say things, right? We've talked about intonation. We've talked about that flow and that kind of prosody with which you speak. But there's another quality of nonverbal communication that's really important, and that's that idea of tone. And it's really hard to explain what that is other than just giving lots of examples, because it's not a grammar thing, it's sort of a prosody thing. Right now I'm using my regular talking voice. It's a little bit more official than just my regular I'm chatting with friends voice, but not much. It's pretty similar to how I talk regularly. But if I was talking like this, then it would sound a little bit different, because my voice goes a little bit higher and I kind of sound I feel like I sound a little girly. I don't know if I do. Right? So there's that. And then there is the more official and slower and measured language that I can use. And my voice kind of evens out, and I try to sound very authoritative, as well as, with my gaze and things like that. I would talk differently if I'm talking to a puppy than I would to a person. And a lot of people don't think about that, or if they have thought about it, they haven't realized that's a thing that you can change. And I go back to like all of my, theater training way back in the day, when I did stuff in high school, and practicing being different characters, right? And finding out like which character do I want to be for this particular thing, because that is oftentimes what communication is. It is embodying the character that you want to be perceived as. And if you think about it and try different things, and then pay attention to the reactions of your audiences, because that's where you'll find out if what you're doing is effective or not. If I start talking like this and I'm really excited and oh my gosh, this is so cool, and like this is absolutely insane, and I see my audience glaze over, I know that's too much. I should take a step back. So again, I don't really know what to call that quality of communication other than tone or
Kind of persona.
persona. That's a good word for it. Yeah, the persona, right?
Yeah.
So think about your persona, and it can be different depending on your audience.
Yeah, I have a friend who would do this going into interviews or other particular parts, and often, if possible, would map that onto someone that was very charismatic, that they knew in the public sphere, that you could try and put yourself in their headspace.
Yeah.
And I hear also that this is an exercise when like CEOs and other leaders are going into important meetings or doing an important presentation. They do spend some time thinking about who
Yes.
they want to be, right? And once you have that idea embodied in a person, it becomes a little bit easier to do all of the little pieces of intonation and body language and other aspects of presence. So
Yeah. And we'll also, I won't get into this today, but we'll start talking about mirroring tomorrow.
Okay.
Because that's a really fun part of developing that persona and how that will come out with any given audience.
Yeah. Great. So updates today. I can say for myself yesterday, I was not feeling well, headachy, a little bit of stomach something. I don't know what it was. But I wasn't feeling well, and I didn't want to be productive. I was having a hard time having clarity of thought to create new stuff. I'd kind of loosely outlined my checklist already from 2 days ago. So I decided to doom scroll productively. So I have my market research. You can check in another video on the channel. We have maybe I can link it somewhere in the video, but that I have my market research process. I didn't do a full market research process, but I have specific places I go to research my target audience. And so I went to Amazon to get books on how to find a business partner. There are not a lot of them. And so I also looked in some like related books, whatever happens when I search for that, right? Because that's what Amazon thinks people looking for a business partner want. So I looked at a few related books too, about like early stage startups, business stuff. That was interesting. And then I looked through the comments. I also went to videos on YouTube. There it was a lot easier to find several videos specifically on how to find a good partner, or 10 types of partners or whatever. So I found several of those, scrolled through the comments. I probably scrolled through hundreds of comments, hence like the doom scrolling. But what I would do is I'd copy and paste some interesting comments about what people liked about the content, or what they needed more, or when they talked about the actual specific problems they're going through. I threw those into a spreadsheet. I got probably around 60 or 70 of them that I can comb through again occasionally where there was something that had a particular insight. I put some notes in. So for example, people mentioned, one person mentioned wanting advice on the drawing up a partnership contract. And then I realized like, oh, if I want to target people who are serious about partnerships, then I could look at, people looking for partnership contracts. Now, I imagine that if I were going to advertise on Google, people searching for like partnership contract stuff, probably that's taken by like a lot of really high priced lawyers. But still, that's, that's something like videos. Yeah. There might be more videos on that. I look for how to find a partner, how to drop a partnership contract might yield a number of other videos, because still, while I found a number of videos, it's like, I don't know, there's maybe 4 to 6 really good ones that had lots of views, and then like a bunch of other ones that just have like 1,000 or 2. So that would enrich the pool of people who are interested in that. Plus, one of the other things I noticed from going down this long list of comments is that about half of them were like, yes, this is exactly what I needed right now. And a bunch of them were like, I wish I had known that a while ago. And that is something to keep in mind when you get contact, when you're trying to like advertise or target people around specific pieces of content. That is that sometimes people look at content aspirationally, meaning they're not there yet, and that's more typically the case. I guess these other people, I'm not sure how these people who had already run into that issue, maybe they were looking for something different, like how to deal with a problematic partner, and then they found this, how to find a partner or something as loosely related or something, and got on that and whatever didn't fit them exactly. And so you're trying to you want to make sure that like if you're going to use a piece of content to target someone, whether it's a book or a video or whatever, right, and frame your target audience around them, you want to look through the comments and see like, am I actually getting the right type of people? And these were people starting businesses, looking to start businesses. There were a few aspirational people, but there's a lot of people by the I wish I'd known this back then category, which shows me there's a lot of these people starting businesses. So it reaffirmed that this is a need that people have. I have some questions because there's also a large subsection of people that said basically, I will never have a partner, right? And it's interesting, they consumed the content, but they didn't they're not interested in partnerships. So maybe they're just fans of, the large accounts that I was drawing from anyway. So I basically went through, hundreds of comments and started segmenting out like which are the types of people that I might be talking to. Are there enough of the target audience here, etc. One thing that is difficult, I was researching a couple days ago, I don't remember how to pronounce his name. It's like Sabri Subi or something like that. He does a lot of stuff with selling, and he talks about doing the market research beforehand and how you should dive into the comments on Reddit and Amazon and YouTube and I also see Twitter and other places, Quora, etc. Those last two I added, but how you should dive into those and find the one thing your audience wants most and give them that. And I very rarely find that is true, right? Like that for the most part, you get the occasional person saying, I want this specific thing, but it's a one-off ask, right? What you get a lot of times are people saying, this was perfect. What's this? Right? Or I wish I'd known this months ago, right? Mm-hmm. And so like this is a very generic form of that. And so like the people who actually specifically ask for something are often an outlier. If you can find that, that's great. People having the same problem over again, but like I don't find a specific, like within the genre of partnership problems, I don't find anything beyond people are insecure about it. They know it's a make or break decision. And for a lot of people, it goes really badly. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I knew going into that. Right. There wasn't like the one marketing thing. And so sometimes when marketing people talk about this process, and maybe I'm just doing it wrong or haven't mastered this yet, and I think this is part of judgment. Maybe a marketing expert would take the same set of data and just say, like, don't go into that data because I'm not seeing these qualifying pieces of a perfect match. Which is kind of the nerve-wracking thing. But for the most part, like I validated the underlying problem exists. This is a big issue for people starting ventures, which is one of the areas I focus on. Probably another angle I could take is how to deal with dysfunctional or absentee partners, because that's also something I help clients with. So there's different market segments, but like this is a valid problem, and I'm just going to have to figure out. I can use probably a few clips of language here and there, but it's not like it was like I found make or break it was one of the most prominent phrases, and I found that like 3 or 4 times out of hundreds of comments that I looked at, or maybe I skipped over it, right? And so it's like you very rarely see everybody talking about the same thing in the same language, right? Enough to like, this is how I should do it. And so I think there is an aspect that like experts probably shield you from, which is you do a whole lot of experimentation, right? And so when someone says you want to find the one thing that people want most and give them that as if it's simple, you're like, yeah, probably. I'm guessing. I don't know. Maybe I'm not a marketing expert yet, but I'm guessing that behind the scenes, they take a general direction like the one I've got, and then they hone it with putting out pieces of content and seeing what people react to, running just small scale ads like I've been doing, etc. So
hopefully that's the process.
well, I imagine like we'll see. Like eventually, maybe I will learn beyond that, and I will share that on my channel. But like I am highly skeptical, at least at this point, right? Having heard him talk about his research process, which validated me, because it's like, okay, he runs this big marketing firm and it's not that different than my own, right? He goes to the same places and look for comments. I added a few additional places, so I might do more in that respect, visit a variety of sites or whatever. I probably don't, again, like things come down to skill and judgment. I may not be looking for the right thing or have the right killer instinct when I'm scrolling through, who knows, but like it wasn't far off the base, but like how he describes that as an expert in retrospect, like, I just look for the big thing. Like I imagine as I wouldn't say novice, but much earlier in my process, what happens when you're not an expert is you're paying attention to too many things and it's overwhelming. And then as you're an expert, you learn how to screen out everything. And so it could literally be that like when I get comfortable, I will just see those 3 or 4 phrases, make or break it, repeat it a few times, and be like, that's enough. Because I realize, that you don't find a lot of repetition between comments or whatever, right? Like, I just know what to hone in on. And, like, perceptually, I just, get so good at this scrolling through people's comments that, like, I don't even see the thanks for this comments anymore. And, like, just the insight pops out at me like it was the only thing that's there. Yeah. I think that's probably what he's describing when, like, give them what they want most is actually, like, the expert perception of being able to, after having done this tons of times, like, just have the most important thing pop out to you.
Yeah, it's the judgment thing.
Right, yeah, that judgment piece. Like, that's what he's describing. And so when experts make things sound simple or like they're easy or just do this, that usually probably comes not because the process is simple, but because they've actually taught themselves what to screen out and not look at just by sheer practice. So that was kind of my big learning from yesterday, doom scrolling.
Yay, doom
Predictively.
scrolling. Yeah, I mean, that's such an oxymoron, but it does kind of work, actually. So that, and especially when you weren't feeling well, and it's the idea of you could doom scroll about something completely non-related, but being able to find tempting. That thing, right? I may or may not have fallen into just a little bit of that yesterday.
Yeah. I'll get to more about that aspect, actually, my business tip. So teaser, like, subscribe. All right. Sorry.
I love this. This is a fun morning.
Yeah.
So, as far as all of my stuff is concerned, I've been kind of paying attention to 2 different things. Obviously, I've got this ad funnel that I've been working on in my offer and the lead magnet, things like that. So my main goal yesterday was to go through and cut out all of the excess and then just pare it down to the template of the thing that I'm going to have as my lead magnet. And as I was going through that process, I sat down and I was like, okay, let's see. And I'm looking at the, Canva document and saying, okay, what can I take out? And there was stuff that was easy. But then once I took out that, it made it so I had to start retooling some other things for it to be coherent, which is actually really good because I could see there were a couple of gaps that I had in my previous document. So that was nice. But I started to run into a lot of mental blocks when I was trying to think about how to reform stuff. When it comes to actual execution of something or an interaction with somebody or whatever, I'm able to keep my focus really good and get things done. But when it comes to abstract thinking, if I don't have a group that I'm collaborating with, I have a tendency to start expanding because it's hard for me to conceptualize something differently from how I've already conceptualized it, which then causes anxiety in my brain, and then all of the other things that are going on right now, like Christmas and you not feeling well and kids and a doctor's appointment and all of these other things, right? That life just happens, right? Life goes on, would then kind of infiltrate, and I would get off track, or I would spend way too much time, hyper focused on one thing. So one of the pieces of feedback that I got when I sent out the rough drafty thing the other day was I should have a different image on the front cover. And because she's like, he looks like a college student. And you want it to be more approachable to wide variety and more businessy people.
Well, and your clientele is older so far.
It's true. And the other thing is, even if he had been older, he's dressed like a Silicon Valley person with jeans and whatever, which is not the Japanese image of a business person. So it was a great piece of feedback. I was like, oh, I like that. But then I fell down the rabbit hole of looking at which picture would be better. And I think I did find one that's really good, but at the same time, was that the best use of my time?
So, yeah, when you initially started saying that, my first instinct was you don't even need a picture for this. But I would say, in general, for a marketing thing, the things that move, for instance, an ad the most are header and image.
Right.
So, actually finding a good image that reflects your character is probably not the most efficient for this particular project, but I actually say like broadening out, like we're trying to work on marketing, actually that probably is an important asset.
So it's kind of the idea of doom scrolling with some productivity when I probably did have the brain capacity to put it somewhere else. And so what I ended up having to do yesterday is like, I was just trying to sit there and think. And that's really hard for me. If I'm staring at something and thinking, I just like, even right now, I'm trying to think about what to say. My brain stops. It just shuts down. And so eventually, after getting distracted by multiple things, I was able to say, okay, no, take a step back. Stop looking at this document, right? Get a clean sheet of paper, right? And if I were to put my thing out in the most simple way possible, what would that look like? And so then I started taking physical notes and things in one of my notebooks and came up with the idea of, okay, well, if I put the entire framework into a bullet list of what the things are, like I have my 4 sections and bullet points of what's in each section, then I'll go from there and I can put the template into that basic format. But it took me several hours of first stewing and then maybe another hour of taking notes and trying like, well, what if I did this? And what if I did that? And that's not time that I generally factor into my work process. I just assume like, I have a thing to do. I will do the thing. But remembering to factor in figuring out how to do the thing. Yeah. Right? When it is this more abstract thing. And I'm, again, hoping that the more I do this process of figuring out how to do the thing, that I will get that judgment, that it'll be a faster thing, and I won't have to worry about, like, how do I put this together? How do I reconceptualize something?
Right. I mean, that's a great tip, that if you need another concept, start from scratch, don't edit. Yeah. And I think people who regularly put out lots of concepts for things do have to learn that. Yeah. And then again, this is like where adopting the right process is important. You're now holding yourself accountable for delivering stuff quicker and a quicker turnaround. And hard. So it's hard, but you're figuring that out. And then, but if you do that consistently, things like starting from scratch will become instinct, where you're like, oh, I need a new version of this, and not just like a not tweaking language version, but like a different concept of what this is and what I'm delivering. Yeah. All right, start from scratch, and then when I've roughed something out, you can go back to another thing, and then maybe edit or like import or borrow. Right?
Which is what I did then eventually once I had that other thing. And so, there's the part of me that's like, well, if I just did it on the thing the first time, it would be faster, but it wasn't, because I just couldn't get past whatever was already there. And so, even though it seemed like it would be less efficient to write things out on paper and diagram stuff and figure it out and then have to transfer that over to my document, honestly, in the end, if I had started with that, it would have been faster. And so recognizing that is a part of my process. I really love pencils and paper and notebooks and stuff like that. It works for my thought process, and leaning into that rather than trying to change it, right? Into something else. So I was able to start. I still have 2 more sections to finish up on that, as well as writing out or filling in, the examples. And part of it, again, with learning how to work on this process, I sent a copy of it to Alec last night, and I was, there's still those parts of me that's like, I didn't finish the stuff that I'd wanted to finish.
But you're producing something every day, which is great.
And that right there is the thing that I'm leaning into and using as a way to learn this, so that I'll be able to do it more easily in the future, and just having, like, giving myself grace that I'm learning how to do this process. And I've had to learn lots of other things in life, and I like learning. Learning is cool. This is just a thing that's hard to learn, and that's okay. It's going to take some time. That's what, like, Healthy Meg says, in my brain. You're learning.
Yay, Healthy Meg.
I know, right? Well, and you know, I'm an educator. Like this is, I coach people. I do help teach people various skills and stuff. And I'm always so like, you can do it. This is great. You're doing fantastic with them. And so trying to like
be that persona for yourself.
Yeah. It's
Feels
hard.
Uncomfortable.
It does. But also it eventually, you know, like I see the benefits of it a lot. And so, yeah. So that's.
What was your mental process right after you had sent that out to me last night?
Oh my goodness, now I can go to sleep. But then I actually didn't go to sleep immediately. I was like, oh my goodness, I need to do something that makes my brain happy. So I played 2048 for like a half hour.
Okay. So I think the good part of that, right, is there was a reward.
Yes.
I think an interesting thing is, to a certain extent, you outsource that reward to 2048 rather than, for instance, telling yourself, wow, I released something today. I'm not used to releasing something every day. That was hard. Good for me, right?
Yeah.
You kind of missed out on that opportunity to practice positive self-talk. And the only reason I bring that up is because I was doing the same thing last night. One of my goals for this week, just because I realize I have a lot of anxiety too, is like I am going to journal on that. And I completely wussed out Monday. I like didn't do it. Put it off. And last night I'm like, all right, I basically, if this is going to be a when I sign off thing, I am going to have to be willing to stay up later to do this and just make sure this happens before I leave my office, I think is probably what I'll have to do, unless I do it earlier in the day.
Yeah.
You know, I wrote that out, and then, like I had the same exact thought, which is, oh my goodness, like, I want to go to sleep now. All right. Or like I can, you know, do the whole nighttime routine of like giving the cat its last snack and brushing my teeth, etc., and then go to bed. But I realized, like, you know, again, be a good boss for yourself. Yeah. You know, if I had a boss when I had just done something difficult for me, new and difficult, you know, if they said, okay, good night, and like that was it, that would be very demotivating, right? And so, you know, I spent a little bit of time, as silly as it sounds, saying like, good for you, Alec, for doing something hard. That was hard and new, and you worked the process, and you know, you're doing the right practice.
Yeah, I like that.
And so like just doing that and like repeating that a couple times, right, to practice this, because this is literally something new that I have to practice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like part of the mental game, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed.
Yeah. Everything is practice. And if you're feeling a lot of anxiety and negativity that your work is hard, there's a good chance that a chunk of that has to deal with your own internal the self-talk that you have practiced to yourself, right? And they're things that are so automatic, right? You identify with those thoughts, right? That come up, like that, oh my goodness, that was hard, and like somewhere in the back of your head, and I'm a weak person for that because that's hard.
Right?
Right? That like automatic might not even be verbalized, but like that is the tenor of what you're thinking. Like that's the tone in your mental voice when you say that was hard, was like implicitly it shouldn't have been, and you're a bad person because it was. Right. You should have learned this before. You should be better at this by now, right? All of that. And that's stuff that like we practice. And there are probably people who've dived into like the roots of where we get this from, you know, more than I think some of that's, you know, other people, what other people say, but I think a lot more of that is what we project other people will say based on like a relatively small sample size of times they actually say that thing.
Yes. Some negativity bias.
Yeah, we've probably taken something that happens like a few times in our lives and multiplied it 1,000,000 times.
And like you said, with everything being practiced, right? I mean, that's how our brains work. Mm-hmm. Everything kind of carves those neural pathways in our minds. And so even if it's not like on purpose. It happens, right? And it takes a lot to derail that, which is great with, good habits, but also really hard with these things that you've built up over years. And again, it comes back to that giving yourself grace. Like, I feel like now I should have known better, but then I always ask myself, but how would I have known?
Yeah. Well, and how would you be good at doing that until you practice?
Exactly. And I've just been ignoring it. So now I'm practicing it and dealing with the discomfort.
Yeah. And so, now part of my weekly goal is not just the journaling, but the positive self-talk after I journal. So that, I can end my day not feeling exhausted, having battled with something difficult, but feeling proud of myself for having battled with something difficult. Yes. So that almost is its own business tip. But rewinding to just before this meeting when I had the business tip that I didn't write down. All right. It's coming. it's in my brain. And I said I had tried to come up with a mnemonic that was bringing it forward. Oh, I know, and I've told myself on stream before that I should write these things
We
down.
even teased it with our fingers, right?
I know, I teased it, and it's so anticlimactic.
This is what happens with our brains, though. We think there's this thing called the forgetting curve,
right? And
you think you're going to remember everything, right? That you always do, except that our brains don't work that way. Forgetting is actually a skill. Right? Our brains are meant to forget because if we remembered everything, we would have a lot of distracting, useless information in our brains. And so they say you've forgotten about 50% of new information after an hour. After 2 days have passed, you've forgotten 70%. And then after a week, you will have forgotten 90% of that thing that you learned if you have not found other ways to re-engage with that same information. So...
Thank you for your elegant stalling. I've got it now.
Yes! It worked!
All right. So one of the keys for forming a new habit, because a lot of what we're talking about is new habits, getting the habit of marketing, getting the habit of releasing things more often instead of being precious and trying to perfect them, getting in the habit of positive self-talk. One of the ways that we get into, we help root this comes from Atomic Habits. And I think this is probably the most original and insight edition of that book. I feel like a lot of the principles are things I kind of knew from other psychological research. But when he said that habits stem from identity, that is a compelling new addition for me. So that the idea is if you tell yourself, I'm a smoker trying to quit, you are telling yourself a story that kind of gives you fudge room to keep smoking, for example. But if you tell yourself, yes, this is hard, but I'm a non-smoker, right? There's a different level of commitment there. And this is not all woo. This is actually the way that you really, for me, leverage this is with symbolic actions, right? And so yesterday I was like, I feel terrible. I want to take off. Honestly, at some point I should take a day off, but now is not that day, right? Now is the time when we should really get good at marketing. And over Christmas break is the time when that would be good to take time off, be with my family, etc., where I'd get a lot more out of that, rather than zoning out one day because I feel not so good. And then I said, well, what would I do that would show that I want to work, right? Not that I have to work, but I'm someone who is really committed to mastering this, even if I feel kind of blocked and not as effective at the writing copy today. And then, market research, all right, I'll get a few books on Amazon and scroll through the comments, especially because I know there's usually not tons of very effective comments for most books on Amazon. So I'm all right, that's short. But once I did that symbolic action, then I'm well, what I really want to target are the YouTube videos. So I'll just pop a few up. There's a lot more comments with those. But I had the momentum going for me. And so I actually did a pretty full day of work.
You did a lot yesterday.
The research. So how do you know that I did a lot?
Well, because you kept saying you did this, and then you did this, and then you did this. And I was like, how are you working? You're not feeling well.
All right. Well, and that's the thing is, like, I didn't rely on, guilting myself into it, which actually saps your willpower. Yeah. I didn't rely on feeling like I had to, again, ultimately, right? If you had a boss kept telling you, like, you have to do this, right? Mm-hmm. You'd get burnt out. I asked myself, like, all right, how can I show that I'm a person who values mastering the skill of marketing and market research, etc.
Yeah.
And so that helped. And I mean, I guess that is, again, going back to that being a good boss for yourself metaphor, right? Mm-hmm. The idea of like, yeah, if I had a boss who's like, hey, I know that's hard. I also know that you're the type of person that could be manipulative, but if it was someone who actually knew you and cared about you and had demonstrated that, like that would be a sign of showing confidence. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So,
and really quick before we end, just kind of, off of that, for me, sometimes it's not even like, sorry, my brain stopped working. So the thing for me that helped yesterday was when I finally thought about, you reminded me that I just have to send you something. And if I focused on that, like sending an email, that's stupidly easy. I know how to do that. I've been sending emails for like 20 years now.
Could have sent me a poo emoji.
I could have.
It would be something.
That would have been fun. I just had to send you the what I had. And so when I focused on that rather than I have to work on this and finish it, right? Because that's big. No, I just have to send you what I have. Then I said, okay, cool. Well, however far I get on it, that's what I will send you. By the time I started thinking that way, it was already like 8:00 at night. And so there wasn't, as much there. But if, you focus on that thing rather than the big thing, then sometimes that's easier, right? Again, it's building those habits. I would like to get to the point where I can say, all right, I will finish this today. But for me right now, it's working just to say, I will make sure I send it to you.
Right. And I think probably what I didn't clarify earlier from this tip, right? That give yourself a new identity to bolster your habit, right? That I am a person who does this now. But how to instantiate that with a symbolic action, what that means is it doesn't have to be effective or completed.
Yeah.
It just has to show that you thought about it and did something. Right? That is the symbolic action, right? So in your case, the symbolic action, like I don't have to have my ad copy live. I have to get used to producing something and sharing it.
Yeah.
And so this is what will do that. Or for me, right? I don't have to write brilliant copy today, but if I'm feeling like doom scroll, because I'm doom scrolling, because I am someone who is committed to mastering the skill of marketing, I'm going to doom scroll on topic.
Yes.
So, right? Just that symbolic gesture. This is a thing I can do. And again, like when you tell yourself that story, you don't have to hold yourself accountable for doing more, but sometimes you will find it naturally happens because instead of leading with guilt or necessity, which can often be demotivators, you're leading with, I am a person who does X, which is actually motivating.
Yeah. Love it.
So.
Excellent.
Nice. I'm loving it. McDonald's.
Oh,
Sorry. Until tomorrow.